also allowing us to hold this event at the presidency. A very warm welcome to the Honorable Foreign Minister, the Chairman, Kashmir Affairs Committee, as well as other speakers, diplomats, and honored guests. For the past 30 years, the people of Pakistan have stood by the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and to mark that, they have been celebrating this day in the last 30 years. We feel for their pain. We are saddened that the promise of self-determination given to them by the international community remains unfulfilled. The UN Security Council resolutions have been willfully ignored by the Indian nation. Equally troubling is the gross human rights violations against the innocent unarmed people of Kashmir by Indian forces. These violations are well documented and documented enough to shake up the conscience of the world. A year and a half ago, the illegality touched a new low when Jammu and Kashmir was illegally annexed by India. Attempts are now being made to erase the very identity of the Kashmiris as well as their demographic composition in the state. The COVID pandemic has added to the plight of the Kashmiri people. The leadership and the people of Pakistan have pledged year after year that they will stand shoulder to shoulder with the people of Kashmir. This pledge is solemn. We look forward to listening to our worthy speakers today and then the Honorable President of Pakistan renewing the pledge of the people of Pakistan to the Kashmir cause. Thank you very much.
Our first speaker of the event is Mr. Ahmed Qureshi, Executive Director, YFK International Kashmir Lobby Group. Mr. Ahmed Qureshi.
The Honorable Mr. President, the Honorable Foreign Minister, the Honorable Special Advisor and NSA, and the Honorable Chairman Kashmir Committee, and the distinguished guests and other speakers, and especially the teams at ISSI and the NST. Thank you very much for this opportunity. The people of Kashmir and Pakistan are not India's enemies. We can live peacefully in this region, we can coexist, and we can prosper. It is India's choice, not a compulsion, but India's choice to prolong a political dispute and turn it into an endless religious and cultural war, and now a humanitarian tragedy. This is a choice that India's political leadership embraced across the aisle and forced the citizens of India, the citizens of Pakistan, and the people of the state of Jammu and Kashmir on a path of conflict. India failed to show the magnanimity that a large country can afford. Despite this, Pakistan and Kashmiris remained magnanimous for the first half-century of this conflict, conducting trade and cultural exchange in the hope that warm contact would soften hearts and spur a compromise. But too much has happened for anyone to suggest that Pakistan and Kashmiris can simply forget what happened and move on. We need a peaceful closure. We need peace. You need closure when the UN human rights experts extensively report on thousands of unmarked mass graves and dozens of documented cases of gang rapes by soldiers. Today, Kashmir is the worst example of military occupation, unique and unparalleled in its depravity, cannot be compared to any other example. There is a positive change in the international media and in the global narrative on Kashmir. The K word, Kashmir, is no longer a taboo word. This positive change in the discourse paves the way for a possible similar breakthrough in diplomacy on Kashmir. Kashmiris have been wronged for 74 years. They deserve answers. We wish India well. We seek peace. And peace is possible through justice, conflict resolution, and the right to self-determination in Kashmir. The people of Kashmir have a beautiful story of bravery and a beautiful story of resistance. Every citizen of the world must and should stand with them. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Ms. Mishal Hussain Malik, human rights activist and chairperson, Peace and Culture Organization. Ms. Mishal Hussain Malik.
Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. First of all, I'm very grateful and honored that such respectable people are sitting amongst the audience. The Honorable President of Pakistan, the Honorable Foreign Minister, the Honorable Kashmir Committee Chairman, to a lot of diplomats, ambassadors, civil society. And I recall last year what happened in the world. We witnessed a very similar, not a similar, but a fraction of the lockdown or curfew or siege that the Kashmiri people witness all throughout their lifetime, especially after 5th of August 2019 Act, when India committed the latest form of war, which is called lawfare, and through a presidential order, they passed a death warrant, a genocide act against an entire unarmed and defenseless nation. But sadly, the whole world was under lockdown last year, and we saw a lot of people losing their loved ones, colossal losses of economies, unemployment, uncertainty, people locked up in their homes and not having enough vaccines or medications or ventilators in the hospitals. So it was in a way this time, I think the audience, because I see a lot of diplomats, can relate to it, and to a lot of Pakistanis, what it feels like to be in your homes, losing your loved ones, not being in contact. Aeroplanes are closed, the airports are closed. But for Kashmiris, this is something which we breathe day in and day out. Students cannot go to school for months. There are army camps inside colleges, schools, on the streets, every nook and corner. And when we go through history, I mean, we have seen various wars and conflict zones and all types of tortures happening around in the past. But what we see in Kashmir, these are not acts of individual violence such as sexual violence, but we have state patronage coming from the Indian state authorities. Whatever they do with the Kashmiri people, we have no right to live, to breathe, to exercise our political freedom. And my husband, along with various other political prisoners, because he's leading the peaceful resistance movement along with others. He's also locked up in the Tihar death cell. We as a family are divided. Once again, this is the 6th year of being away from each other. From 2 years, we cannot hear his voice. That is the story of every divided family or of political prisoners. And right now, what's happening over there, India has, after committing this lawfare, has surpassed all international norms and treaties, Geneva Conventions, UN Security Council resolutions, all bilateral treaties. They have even superseded their own Indian constitution, because this was the only organ, 370 and 35A, that used to connect them with administratively so-called controlling Kashmir. But now the difference is that before we had their occupation over there, the occupational forces, which are the highest in the world, but now the Indian public can go and shift there and transform it into a mini India. I mean, you people should realize that this area is a disputed territory where not Indian law falls, but international law falls over there. That should be exercised there. They have violated Geneva Convention 4. They are changing our demography. They are marginalizing the Kashmiris. And in simple terms, Kashmiris have become refugees on their own land. We have become stateless All our rights of ownership have been snatched and given away to Indians. And to those Indians that follow the Modi, the fascist, the Hindutva, the Akhand Bharat narrative. And right now, the RSS diehard follower, because RSS is a terrorist organization that has been involved in numerous terrorist activities over decades, be it Mecca bombings, targeting the churches of Christians, forced conversions of Christians, the Gujarat killings, and many others. And what's happening in Kashmir is nothing new for the world. But now, at least, because this is a law of nature, that a time comes when completely helpless, voiceless people, they have given their utmost to combat, and they are coffin-clad, combating the highest fully equipped army. But this is the maximum the Kashmiri people can do. And now it's the turn of all those people around the world to play an effective role, to raise a voice before this world becomes totally, totally unsafe. And we must not forget 27th of February in 2019, when nuclear codes were exchanged between India and Pakistan. The world was very close to witnessing a micro-nuclear exchange, which means that if, God forbid, that would have happened, then definitely 2/3 of the world's population would have been wiped out. This is not me saying it. This is nuclear scientists' research that says that there can be nuclear ice age, we can freeze to death, and there can be nuclear famine. Humanity can end. And this is so close to all of you. You all will be affected by it, not just people of that conflict of Kashmir. And now we have 3 nuclear countries. We don't have just India and Pakistan, we also have China and Ladakh. So it's at loggerheads. The situation is escalating. And the only hope right now for the world is to save the Kashmiris, to save the Kashmiri representatives, because that chair is lying missing. Luckily, I'm over here because I cannot go there, because even against me, Indians think I am also a terrorist, because I'm supporting the voice of my people, and my husband is in a death cell, 5x7 death cell, and he's being physically and mentally tortured because he is the face of that resistance. And I am speaking up about him and about the plight of Kashmiri women, children, political prisoners, and what they're going through. And then India labels me as a terrorist because I am a woman. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a vocal woman. I will rise up even when I cannot sleep for almost 2 years. I have not spoken to my husband, and he was arrested on our 10th wedding anniversary. From these 2 years have been a living hell for all Kashmiris. And the day they raided him, they tore away our wedding albums, they burnt our home, and that's what they did with a lot of other Kashmiris, and then the nuclear codes were exchanged. And right now, where are we heading as humanity? That is the big question mark. So I appeal to all of you, especially to the countries that are directly linked with the United Nations, and to the United Nations Secretary General and UN President. I met them and I told them that it's high time that you must nominate a Kashmir envoy. Kashmiri people are dying, we are defenseless, and we need your support before the Kashmiris become extinct. And you can only see us in museums, our shawls, our handicraft, our culture, our heritage. And by that time, it'll be too late. So I think we must bring those Kashmiri leadership and people back from their prisons, get them released. And right now, what's happening in India, the minorities, the way they are suffering over there, the farmers' movement, the anti-minority bills, construction of a mandir on Babri Masjid, all these things are linked with the fascist Hindutva mindset of Modi. And the Kashmiri leadership used to appeal to the Indian public that please stop voting for such leaders, because a time will come, what you people are doing with innocent Kashmiris who are fighting peacefully for their legitimate right of freedom. If you will not raise a voice for us, then God forbid, a time will come when such voices, such leadership, such mindset will burn you apart, and your secular fabric will be torn apart. And that is what is happening. And I think this is the time that the Indian people should also rise up against this, the public of India, against such policies, because this is not good, not just for India, but for the entire region. So thank you. And in the end, just a few verses I would like to share with all of you, which I have written for my husband, Yasin Malik, who is right now in Tihar death cell, and fabricated, forged cases are being filed against him. And they can do anything with him, hang him, lifetime imprisonment, whatnot, and no legal access. And this is the story of Asiya Andrabi. This is the story of Saeed Ali Gilani, of Mirwais Umar Farooq, because they want our entire movement to become leaderless. And if the world desires a solution to this problem, then Kashmiri representatives are part of that solution. Otherwise, I'm afraid that we are heading towards World War III, because the nuclear commands of India are in the hands of a fascist, a radical, and a thirsty, bloodthirsty man of Kashmiris. So these are the verses. O my Yasin, where have you gone? It's been 23 months and 17 days since we heard your merry voice. How it haunts me, what you whispered the night of 22nd of Feb, when we exchanged our wedding vows a decade ago. Now the tyrant whips you with a single blow and drags you by the handcuff to such a low. To little Razia Sultana, your final words, my daughter, I'm going afar. Yet she peeps restlessly, thy window searching thy stars. Where is Papa hiding behind the moon? I'm afraid it's the gallows of barrack number 7, Tihar, where no light descends, nor sunlight creeps into the walls. Calamitous was thy night of severance, terrible beyond words. I'd die with pain, had I to die that night. O my Kashmir, when the vultures took you away, all your admirers left you astray. You gave a glimpse of heaven, they say, another name for paradise. Our hearts are bleeding, blood dripping from our veins. Some brothers of Hitler are celebrating blood parties on our soil so red. Thy rivers are red with graves at every mile. Oh my Kashmir, oh my Kashmir. Thank you.
Now I invite Honorable Dr. Mehmood Yusuf, Special Assistant to Prime Minister on National Security, for his remarks.
Assalamu alaikum ji, good afternoon. And thank you, Azasa, once again for partnering with us to make this happen. I'll be very brief and want to make 3 or 4 points, largely for our guests who are here to listen to this from the international community. Let me just begin by reflecting on what has been said, which is an impossible act to follow, a personal story. But there's a fundamental problem with which I deal every day sitting in my office. Because I look at a country where my Prime Minister's instructions are to focus on economic security, to focus on welfare, to focus on connectivity, with a central pillar of his vision being regional peace. That's the task I've been handed. And then I look across my eastern border and find a country that's gone from bad to worse, a country that's become more and more intolerant, that celebrates vigilantism, and has been approaching the illegally occupied territory of Kashmir the way the 2 speakers before me have spoken. With this difference in mind, the toolkit that Pakistan works with to effect change in policy and to achieve the ultimate objective is very limited. What is the ultimate objective? 2. Number 1, and the ultimate sort of goal, is peace. Even today, despite everything else, what we look at is how to achieve peace in the region. Because without peace, we can't fulfill our economic dream, and our economic security paradigm remains half-baked. But to get to that peace, the world has already told us the manner in which the Kashmir dispute has to be resolved. I haven't come up with that, Pakistan hasn't come up with that, nor has India. It is enshrined in the UN Security Council resolutions, decided by the United Nations, on a plea taken by India. We know exactly what we need to do. And there's no movement on that. If there's no movement on that, I'm afraid this whole idea of regional peace is basically words that increasingly, at least if I speak for myself, I feel the world is not serious about. So then I raise the next question. The champions of human rights don't seem to care about Kashmiri lives. The champions of regional stability, which is crucial if you want nearly 2 billion people to find a way to prosper, don't seem to link the outstanding dispute of Kashmir and what is happening in illegally occupied Kashmir with the need for peace. And if you leave everything aside, people who talk about strategic stability at the highest level, we're talking of a nuclear region, does not seem to matter. What seems to matter are short-term mercantilist interests. What seems to matter is a myth that our eastern neighbor can do the bidding of some of the countries who want to hold back another rising power. Whatever it may be, I think my job here would be to implore the international community. Don't do it for Pakistan. Don't look at Pakistan's stance. Definitely don't look at real estate and territory if that's where you can't go. Simply look at the fact that millions of human lives are being treated as animals in illegally occupied Kashmir. And if, ladies and gentlemen, anybody feels that with that attitude, this region can be stable, peace can come to this region, and even for those investors who are looking at this region as a lucrative market, you can have a real economic activity. It's not going to happen. So it defies logic that the world remains silent on this longest outstanding dispute as far as the UN is concerned. Let me just say two things at the end. Peace remains Pakistan's preference. We've worked towards it. The Pakistani Prime Minister said when he took office, if India takes one step, we'll take two. Unfortunately, India's taken many, many steps just in the opposite direction. Even today, if there is seriousness about resolving this dispute, we know what international law says about it. Come to terms with that fact, sit down and resolve the problem, and this region can move forward. But our offer of peace cannot be seen as a weakness. Pakistan has stood by the Kashmir cause and Kashmiris for 73 years. It will continue to do that. But if we want to really move forward, then the enabling environment has to be created by our neighbor, not us. It's the neighbor that has taken this relationship to where it is, and the environment in occupied Kashmir where it is. That has to change before anything can move forward. We can't sit here, keep putting out dossiers for the world to look at, where in gory details of terrorism being perpetrated against Pakistan have been presented, and we just pretend that it hasn't happened. So the enabling environment has to come from the opposite side, and you will find Pakistan willing and more than willing. And finally, let me just end by saluting every single Kashmiri that has been fighting for this cause, and the Kashmiri resistance that has been there for 73 years and will continue to the day, we are sure, without a doubt, till the right to self-determination is given. Thank you very much.
Now I request Honorable Maktoum Shah Mehmood Qureshi, Foreign Minister, for his remarks.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable President of Pakistan, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. We've gathered here to express solidarity with the people of Jammu and Kashmir. No expression of solidarity with the Kashmiris is complete unless we ensure that their basic rights and liberties are not violated on a daily basis by the Indian occupation forces and deliver the promise of international community of their inalienable right to self-determination. Ladies and gentlemen, 1.5 years ago, India was essentially deluded when it took illegal and unilateral actions on the 5th of August 2019. Deluded that the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir will accept these actions as their fate. Deluded that India would hoodwink the entire international community, and deluded that it would be successful in depriving the Kashmiris of their right to self-determination forever. None of this have happened or will ever happen. India has failed and will continue to fail in its dark attempts. Today, India stands fully exposed before the international community for usurping the fundamental freedoms of the Kashmiri people. India's human rights violations have removed the facade of it being a so-called democracy. Sadly, despite the global condemnation, India has not corrected its course. On the one hand, India is busy further perpetuating its occupation of the IIOJK through illegal demographic changes, and on the other, its political and military leaders continue to spew hate and hostility towards Pakistan. The recent report by EU Disinfo Lab about India's global disinformation campaign against Pakistan has further validated Pakistan's position about India's evil designs. Ladies and gentlemen, for far too long, India has oppressed the innocent people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Its tactics include, but are not limited to, an inhuman military siege, the most unprecedented communication blockade in modern history, extrajudicial killings in fake encounters and staged cordon and search operations, usurping rights to freedom, life, liberty, education, and every other possible human right of the Kashmiris. Use of pellet guns against peaceful demonstrations. Destruction of Kashmiri houses to inflict collective punishment on Kashmiri communities. Implementing an elaborate and well-planned strategy of military occupation, land confiscation, influx of non-Kashmiris, and creation of alien settlements in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Granting complete impunity to the Indian occupation forces through draconian laws and denying the right to self-determination of the Kashmiri people. Ladies and gentlemen, Let me emphasize that the world community cannot look away when millions of Kashmiris face the threat of extermination through genocidal acts of Indian occupation troops. It is not me, the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, making this assertion. Rather, independent observers like Genocide Watch have issued alerts. Distinguished guests, India's denial of the Kashmiris to right to self-determination is an affront to the international community. It is the will of the international community that is represented through the numerous UN Security Council resolutions on Jammu and Kashmir dispute. It is that very will that India continues to disobey. India's human rights violations in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir challenge the collective conscience of mankind. India cannot pretend that what happens in this internationally recognized disputed territory is an internal matter. Let me acknowledge that the world community has responded to the humanitarian crisis in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Condemnation by multilateral and human rights organizations, international media, civil society, and parliaments around the globe is a testimony to both the currency and the urgency of Jammu and Kashmir dispute. Though significant, the response is, however, not enough. Not enough because no response can be enough till India is held fully accountable for its serious crimes against the Kashmiri people, until the realization of the Kashmiris' legitimate right to self-determination. Ladies and gentlemen, I therefore once again call upon the international community to hold India accountable and demand that India undertakes these steps. Immediately lift the continuing military siege and rescind illegal and inhuman actions taken in IIOJK. Remove restrictions on communications, movement, and peaceful assembly. Immediately release the incarcerated Kashmiri political leaders and allow them to express their wishes of the Kashmiri people. Free arbitrarily and illegally detained Kashmiris. Reverse the new domicile rules designed to change the demographic structure of the Indian-occupied Kashmir and cancel all fake domicile granted to non-Kashmiris. Remove the draconian laws granting impunity to Indian occupation forces. Allow access for United Nations observers, international human rights and humanitarian organizations, and the international media to Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Immediately halt its ceasefire violations across the line of control and the working boundary. Stop sponsoring terrorism against the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and fulfill its obligation of holding a free and impartial plebiscite under the auspices of the United Nations to let the Kashmiris exercise their inalienable right to self-determination as enshrined in numerous Security Council resolutions. Ladies and gentlemen, I would conclude my remarks with the words of the Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel. He said, and I quote, "We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the terminator, never the tormentor, never the tormented. now is the time to take sides. On this Kashmir Solidarity Day, let us vow to help the oppressed and not the oppressor. Let us promise to encourage the tormented and not the tormentor. And let us decide with the innocent people of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and not their brutal occupier. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to invite the chief guest, His Excellency Dr. Arif Alvi, the President, Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I need to pick this up then. Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mehmood Shah Qureshi Sahab, Chair Kashmir Committee, Shahryar Afridi Sahab, Director Institute of Strategic Studies, Azaz Sahab, SAPM Mohid Yusuf Sahab, Mr. Qureshi, Mishal Malik Sahiba, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. It is an honor for me to welcome you to the President's House to be part of the special event to mark the Kashmir Solidarity Day. It has been 73 years and you've heard a number of speakers as well as a presentation on what has been happening in Kashmir. We gather here to commemorate the huge sacrifices which have been made by the Kashmiri people, but at the same time, to let the world know, let the world not forget what has been happening there, what is happening there, and what were the promises made to the Kashmiri people. It has been a long struggle, not only since illegal Indian occupation of Jammu and Kashmir, but even before against the Dogra Raj which the Kashmiri people have gone through, when their Kashmir was sold for 7.5 million rupees to the Dogra ruler by the British. It's a sore spot which has been there for more than a century, and the people of Kashmir has borne the brunt of rule of brutalities against them. And that sadly continues today, and it's Pakistan's responsibility along with that to support, along with the struggle of the Kashmiri people, to support that and support them and to make the world, remind the world that they should not forget what has been promised to them. And what my Prime Minister, Mr. Imran Khan, spoke in the General Assembly, that it was the United Nations which had promised plebiscite and fairness and justice to the people of Kashmir. So therefore, the responsibility therefore comes to the international community. It is for Pakistan because they are Kashmiri brethren. Sometimes the world believes and thinks, which is not true, that it is a matter of real estate. No, it is a matter of hearts and souls. It is a matter of human bodies. It is a matter of human minds. It is the matter of the women and children. It is the matter of people living under atrocities and under aggression for such a long time. There have been numerous United Nations resolutions in this regard, and in coming here, I wanted to look at some of them, and I made a note that the first resolution was the UN resolution 38, then 39, and then 47, which ensured that there must be a democratic, impartial plebiscite as a right for the people of Kashmir to decide where they want to go. And it was reaffirmed in the resolution number 51, and then resolutions 80, 91, I go on, and 96, India accepts all resolutions and plebiscite, and so do all the nations of the United Nations. Then resolution 98, then 122, reaffirmed the resolutions previously passed, that the Kashmir, and then 123 and 126, that the International Committee of Nations reaffirmed their promise to the Kashmiri people. Had we not believed in the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, Kashmir was liberated. Had the ceasefire not taken place, had Jawaharlal Nehru not run to the United Nations looking for a ceasefire, the Kashmiri people were liberating themselves. And Pakistan, believing in the United Nations, believing in the Committee of Nations, a number of few ambassadors represent that community, believing in the world, and the United Nations was in its infancy, and there was tremendous hope. So Pakistan agreed to the ceasefire, and therefore it has, India since then has gradually moved away from its commitments to the international community, and to suppress the people of Kashmir, it has resorted to brutality, it has resorted to pellet guns. Some of the images you saw, something which is not used by any country in the world, and by India also only in Kashmir. I remember in the years 2013, 14 and 15, when I was a member of the National Assembly, I had challenged India that it will never, I had made a claim that it will never use that in any other region except in Kashmir, because it knows that the Kashmiris are not with them. Imagine the fact that after August the 5th in 2019, when it changed its own articles of 370 and 35A, wherein it promised the Kashmiri people at the time in 1947, 48 and 49, it promised the Kashmiri people that we will ensure the fact that your population is not going to be changed, your property ownerships will remain as you want it to be, and in 2019 it changed that. What has happened since then? The Kashmir always had a bigger proportion, as the biggest proportion of or ratio of population to security forces, and instead what it was promised that the coffers of capital would flow in, there will be tremendous peace. India had to increase the number of security forces to 900,000. Imagine a population of 8 million Kashmiris has almost 1 million security forces. So there's one security force person with a gun standing there on 8 Kashmiris. That includes women, children, old people and everybody. So that is because the Kashmiris are resisting Indian occupation, not because of any other reason, but the fact that they wanted a different position of Kashmir with Pakistan, which was promised to them, which they hoped as the division of India was taking place, according to a principle that the majority areas would go towards Pakistan, and therefore that principle was not implemented there. The new change of demographics, my foreign minister has mentioned that fact, it is like an apartheid which is being created. The new change in demographics, imagine an 8 million population, but the new domiciles which have been issued are close to 1.5 million. So 8 million population today is already being challenged with new domiciles being given, as Mashal Malik talked about, domiciles being given to the loyalists of Hindutva who intend to migrate to change the demography of Kashmir. And we must stop that from happening. And who will stop them? If Pakistan has promised itself and promised to the Kashmiri people that we stand with them on political, moral and diplomatic levels. We continue to pursue that course in the legal framework which the world should understand. There's a peaceful struggle. Pakistan is talking about peace, as the commitment made by the Prime Minister as soon as he came into government. He promised that if you take one step forward, we'll take 2 steps in the same direction. That did not happen. India, in fact, and it has been revealed lately, India, in fact, after Pulwama, which was probably self-created, after Pulwama, India did aggression against Pakistan, and it has come to our knowledge throughout the world that it was that attack. Imagine that attack happened because it was interested in getting a bigger share of the Indian vote. A risk which has been taken, attacking across international borders. I believe today that the world should understand that India is a very irresponsible nuclear state. India did its first blast in 1974, Pakistan did not. India blasted nuclear weapons, as it tested nuclear weapons in 1999, and when Pakistan thought that it has to expose its hand also, Pakistan went ahead. India came so close in triggering what some of my friends have spoken about, the possibility of a limited nuclear war. It's an irresponsible situation right now. A belligerent state who can go across for election reasons, go across and attack Pakistan, blaming Pakistan for something which Pakistan never did. Probably they had their own fake encounter, dirty hands in it, and then it attacked Pakistan. So I believe the world should realize it's a belligerent state, it's an irresponsible state, and therefore it is the responsibility of the world to expose what is happening. India undid the special status, and as our foreign minister demanded today, it has to undo whatever it has done. It has to move towards plebiscite. That is the only solution, will remain the only solution of Kashmir. There can be no other solution of Kashmir. And I insist, and Pakistan insists on those lines. Let me insist that I am grateful to the United Nations Secretary General for having talked about this, for having pushed even the statement which came out yesterday. It reminded India that India and Pakistan must come to a peaceful resolution in these areas. Let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, particularly from the diplomatic corps here, because this message primarily we want for the world to understand. We are requesting you to let your governments know that it is an important area. In fact, whatever is happening in India, Pakistan has learned from the past. Whatever is happening in India, they want to rewrite history. They are working against their own minorities. They are creating a schism within India itself. It wants to rewrite history, and it is not pleasing for us, because Pakistan knows that if in one border, for example, on our western border, when there is an uncertainty, it affects Pakistan. It affects Pakistan's rise towards economic prosperity. It affects Pakistan's struggle in poverty alleviation. It affects Pakistan's struggles in health and education, while India is dividing its own country, is working against minorities. The Hindutva regime is there, very strongly there, and the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and in fact our Foreign Minister, and all of us have called to the world that these are makings of a genocide. When you start rewriting history, when you start isolating communities, when there are riots which then reduce the efficacy of the minority population in India. So I must thank the United Nations Secretary General, and I must remind you, ladies and gentlemen, of the UNHCR's report in 2018, which listed for the first time in great detail what the atrocities being committed in India, in Kashmir, against the people, against innocent civilians. What we want, ladies and gentlemen, is that the media should also continue playing its role. India has closed Kashmir. In Pakistan, you can go to our side of Kashmir, the Azad Kashmir, which we call, freely. All diplomats, in fact, the Pakistan government during the last year made those arrangements, but India does not allow visits of foreign delegations. It does not allow the media to go in. It has curbed its own Wi-Fi situation, reduced the bandwidth for people. They cannot inform, they cannot send messages out. That can only happen even after 73 years, when the population of Kashmir has never been satisfied with Indian occupation. India could have made lives easier. Then the wishes of plebiscite is the wish of the Kashmiri population. It's not the wishes of Pakistan, and the plebiscite had recognized that. So, ladies and gentlemen, while things are getting worse, let me give hope. Let me say today, in response to what Mishal mentioned, Mishal Malik Sahiba mentioned, which Shah Sahib, our foreign minister, mentioned, both of them used two words which I think I would like to comment on, that there may be extermination or extinction of the Kashmiri people. And in that, I would like to quote a Czech-born French novelist, Milan Kundera, and he writes in his novel, Laughter, in book Laughter and Happiness, and he writes that the first step in liquidating a people is to erase its memory. the first step to erase its memory. Destroy its books, its culture, its history. Then have somebody write new books, manufacture a new culture, invent a new history. Before long, the nation will begin to forget what it is and what it was. The world around it will forget even faster. So the struggle, ladies and gentlemen, that's what he writes. The struggle against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. We will not let the world forget about Kashmir. We will fight for them in all diplomatic, political. The past is never dead in the diplomatic, political, and moral ways, and we will expose what is being done. The past is never dead, and I would like to give a message to the Kashmiri youth and the Kashmiri people that Pakistan stands with you. Pakistan stands with you and assures you that your liberty is not far away. It is close. It is within your grasp. Have faith and continue your struggles. You have sacrificed tremendously, and Pakistan is there with you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will not allow the world to forget. Thank you very much.
हम दुनिया को आपकी जगह